Today I'll be showing you how to build early game weapons in Grey Zone Warfare significantly cheaper than buying them directly from the traders in game, because these things are overpriced for the most part, but there are a few things that you need to watch out for, and the principles here will actually apply all the way through to the end game as well if you want to save money and maximize as much as you can. So I wanted to make this video today because I know a lot of you are returning to the game after a long hiatus, and basically one of the big things in Grey Zone now is that you have these containers that are really quite expensive. They're kind of the stretch goal in this game right now. So saving money in the early game and the mid game is really important to be able to get to these cases. As you can see, I've managed to get up to about 60k just going around. Haven't really done any loot runs, but just being efficient with my money and with my weapons and making sure I'm picking up stuff and selling the right items. So one thing that you can do, you can significantly reduce the amount that it costs you to buy weapons from the various traders. So we're going to start looking at Gunny to begin with, and we'll look at two very easy examples. The first one with the M9A1, because it's got very few parts. You can see it's a basic pistol. Now the thing that you need to understand about these is that you can buy the lower, or the sort of main base component that actually makes up the gun, especially the trigger assembly and a few other parts depending on the weapon, aka its barrel as well. But for this one in particular, you've got this guy here, the M9A1. So this is the base of the weapon. That's $204. And then the things that we need to add on, what you could do in Grey Zone is you click on that particular part and it shows you everything that it is compatible with. So we have the M9A1 hammer, we have the M9A1 standard barrel, we have the M9A1 slide, and we have the M9A1 grip. This is pretty much everything that we need. Now clearly there is a magazine as well, so if we scroll up a little bit, and you can find this 15-round magazine. We can add that on, and you can see all of this comes to $988. There's a couple of rounds missing out of the magazine because it's got 15 FMJs in it, but that's very, very cheap. I'll show you the equivalent here. If I just stick it in there with 15, it's only 15 bucks. So that takes us to 1,003 if you want to be exactly fair. And from Gunny, it costs 1,300. So you may say to yourself, well, does this really matter? It's only $300. But it's the percentage that makes a difference, because as you can see, as you move up through these different weapons, some of them cost significantly more. So this is where you start making some big savings. So next, let's look at the CQA1. This is basically like a Chinese copy of the M4, and we're going to use this as a benchmark 3,600 to figure out what we can do. So let's go down and find where this is. So we've got this one here. It's semi-auto, by the way. Let me just point that out. It is single fire only. You find this on some AI around the world, so you can't go full auto with this. They have added the M16A1, which is full auto, and you can actually use these interchangeably. So if you want to build an M4 equivalent, you can just use the M16A1 lower. But for the time being, we're just going to show the CQA1 to show the cost savings. So $340, right. So what else do we need now? We now need to have an upper. So we're going to use the CQA1 upper receiver. On top of that, we're going to put in one of these barrels, the one that's used within this particular build to make everything fair. We'll just go and check it. So that's the 14.5-inch barrel. So we'll put that one in here. Then we've got a few other various bits and pieces. So we're going to have to put in the CQA1 pistol grip. We've got this handguard here, which is that guy. We've got a flash hider, this one there. We've got a gas block, which is this one. There's one for each. We've got a carry handle, which, to be honest, you may not want to actually put on at all. And I don't believe you can actually buy it at level 1. If you go to level 2, you can see that under sights and scopes, you can see the AR-15 carry handle. We'll just put it in for price optimization, but you might not actually want to do this. If you do want the carry handle, this is one of the reasons why the M16 upper is a little bit more expensive, because it's basically got the carry handle cost built into it. The reason why you might want to do this is that there is a way to attach a sight into that, which allows you to get over the front post. So let's just carry on and build everything. So then we need the CQA1 buffer tube. On top of that, we then need to have one of these stocks, the CQA1 butt stock, and then we're going to need this charging handle over here. And then there's a 20-round magazine. There's one equivalent in the shop there, so we'll just use that. And to make everything perfectly fair, as you can see, this has got SP inside, so we'll just get 20 rounds of that just to show the price comparison. Obviously, you're probably not going to buy this. Well, you might buy this if you're using this particular weapon, but you don't have to buy this. You're not compelled to if you're building it yourself. So all of this comes to 2,628, which I think is a pretty remarkable discount, because that gets you to 2,628 divided by the exact weapon price is this here, 3,584. And that gets us to 73%. So if you take one off that, that gets us to a 27% discount. So you're basically spending 30% more if you buy one of these things. And there's also probably items that you don't want to buy in here. For example, the carry handle, if you're buying this weapon and you don't actually want the carry handle at all, you're buying it for $204 and then you're probably selling it for $50. So you're making a net loss of $150. Now, before we move on to the other guns, I did want to point out this one thing about the upper receiver on the M16. When you get to level 2 Gunny, there is actually another part. Let me just go down and click that again so we can go and find it. and that is here, the AR carry handle Picatinny rail. So it's unfortunate you can't get this at level 1 traders, but you are able to get this at level 2. So this allows you to stick this into the carry handle and then use it with some kind of optic on it. As you can see at Gunny level 2, you get these sights, the EXPS2 holographics and the one with one dot and one with the circle. So the same principle applies at level 1 for the M16 as well. You can get this for basically a 30% discount, 25% discount as well. Same thing with the M870 shotgun. You can build this for about 900 instead. Now you do sometimes have to worry about which parts you can get and which parts you can't. And one of the great things about the M16 here is that rather than having to have this like very expensive long weapon, as I said before, the parts are interchangeable. So you can go and buy yourself an M16 lower, and then you could just use all of the CQ-A1 parts on it if you want to, which means you don't need the carry handle, but you do still need to somehow deal with the front gas block on these M4s, which is a little bit unfortunate, but all these parts are easily mixed and matched. We then also have the MP5, so we can see up here we've got the MP5 there, 2,800, which is pretty expensive for an SMG. But instead, if you build it like this, so we'll take the MP5 lower, we've got the MP5 upper receiver, we've got a cocking handle. On the upper, we've got the wide forearm, which is the handguard. And you can probably see here what the issue might be in the fact that we don't have the ability to buy the stock. So at level 1, you have to buy it from Gunny, even though it's more expensive than you would get if you built it a different way. But you have to buy the stock from level 2 Gunny. So you can't actually take advantage of this yet. It means that you have to buy them for 2,800, which is a bit of a shame. If you go to level 2, I will then show you how much this ends up being. So these stocks, you can have a look at the stats. They're all very slightly different. You've got the regular stocks, which is 3% on recoil and ergonomics, and this one's 2% and 4%. Not going to make that much difference at this point. Maybe I'll make a video going through the weapon stats properly in 0.4 to remind everybody, so I'll do a bit of investigation into that. You might notice this one's also got a MP5 3-lug adapter. This one doesn't have any stats at all, so if you're not going to put a muzzle device on it, then you don't need to use it. Also the same thing for the rear sights and the front sight, you don't need to use those either if you're going to put a sight on top, which at level 2 you probably want to using this thing, the low profile mount, because then that allows you to add basically any of these like random things that you get access to, the holographics and a few other things on the other traders that we'll see in a little bit. So this thing is going to be a workable MP5. We'll put the magazine in there just so it's comparable, and this costs 1,941, which is, again, is about a third off versus the base version. You can make this better than the one that you get off here for cheaper by simply reselecting this down there, and then you can add either the lug adapter or the threaded lug adapter. May as well go for the cheaper one. They both don't do anything, they both don't have any actual parts on them, but this one allows you to then add this guy, which is the flash hider, which gives you a muzzle device efficiency bonus as well if you want to do that. I think for the early game weapons, it's not really worth it particularly, but this comes to 2,300, which is still cheaper than the base MP5 that doesn't have that upgrade on it. So it's well worth building these guns this way. It also builds your muscle memory in working out how to actually build these things and what fits to what. Clicking on stuff and seeing kind of what the compatibilities are helps you just understand exactly what's going on. Okay, a build that's slightly more complicated. We have this one here, which is 7,300, which is really getting quite expensive. So this thing, the full price is 7,297. Now, we already knew that you could build an M16 basically with parts from Gunny, especially up at level 2. And what we're going to do here, I'll just quickly whip this together so we don't have to go through it from scratch because we already talked about it. Right, so we've built the base weapon. This is $3,000. Remember, some of these things are replaceable, so you can look through and see which parts you want to use. You don't need to use exactly the same stuff on every single piece. Instead of this, you could potentially use these stocks instead. If you use the CQ-A1 buffer tube, you could use the M4 standard stocks or the CQ-A1 butt stocks instead. But it doesn't really matter at this point. We're just trying to do a comparison here. So this is 3,000. So you can see this one is 7,300. Now, the only thing that I haven't put on here is the bayonet lug accessory. We could go down here and put this on. It depends whether you want to use a flashlight or not on the front, which you could well do. It adds just a little bit of cost. But now, when we see the ACOG, this thing costs 2,400 from Gunny. So you can see that this is just like no way going to make up the difference. This thing is now 5,500, whereas this guy from the trader directly is 7,300. So we're saving nearly $2,000 by building it ourselves. And also we can optimize it in a way that we can basically just build it how we want. We don't need to use this particular stock. We don't need to use the handguards that were given on here. We don't even need to necessarily use the barrel that comes with this default build either. So this is a really good way of figuring out how to save some money on these builds builds too. And next we're going to look at a sniper rifle. So the M700 is a good one that I've been using recently. It uses M80 rounds that you get off Gunny. They're nowhere near as good as in EFT. So as you can see, you get M62 Tracer and you get M80. In this, they only pen through NIJ3, which is kind of the equivalent of, like, I don't know, a class 3 armor or something in Tarkov, I would say. I know that that's not exactly how it works, but in terms of the progression, this is the US system, so typically it's like 1 point behind. So class 3 in this game would be class 4 in EFT, but generally the way that the armor works is you've got like class 3 plus, and class 3 plus, which is sort of your different tiers, with class 3 plus currently being the best. So that's more like tier 5, I guess, in EFT, because I think class 4 is coming at some point, just not yet. But anyway, back to the M700. So this thing is costing 5,400 and has a scope on it. So again, Gunny has got a lower receiver down here for the M700. That is this one. And this is Gunny level 2 at this point, by the way. So that's 765. There's 2 barrels. There's 22-inch and an 18-inch barrel. This one comes with the 18. The difference really is mainly ergonomics. So the 22-inch is longer, doesn't have any ergo on it, whereas this one does. It's easy to hold up for a decent amount of time. I actually think that the ergonomics is probably quite important. I need to check to see exactly how much longer that makes the arm stamina, because I tend to run out of arm stamina a lot in this game, and so I were on the side of ergonomics, to be honest with you. But you can see that this one is super accurate. 0.6 is very, very good accuracy. You'd need to be fighting over quite long range though, and at the moment there are some zeroing bugs. So I think I'd probably go with the 18-inch barrel for the time being, just because long range shooting is kind of tricky in this game with a few quirks that we've got, especially through 0.4. So we're going to add that on. And then what we need to do is add one of these stocks. So this one is black. We actually don't have the access to a black stock. We've got a wooden version, and we've also got a polymer version here, this Precision Pro Series 2000. This one gives you 6% recoil control, and this gives you 5 and 1. I would almost be tempted to take the wooden stock, honestly, just for the extra ergo, because we don't really care about the recoil control that much on these weapons. It does determine how far the scope jumps up after you take a shot. You can now hold left click, and you won't rack the bolt, which does technically make it slightly easier to see where your shot landed, although you do need to control for the recoil first, unlike something like Tarkov where it resettles into the middle. Grey Zone's a bit different, and when the gun fires, the position of the barrel relocates and it stays there, so you have to move it back down yourself. So recoil is a little bit more important, but only a little bit. We've got a 5-round magazine, which we're just going to grab from up here. Just this one of the P-mags. Let's go down and grab our lower receiver again. Go and click on this. I wish it didn't deselect every time that you move around. If you use the scroll bar, it deselects, and also if you drag something into here, it deselects as well, which is kind of annoying. I wish it just stayed on that, but something for the devs to sort out at some point. So now we need an M700 Picatinny rail. On top of that, we're going to add either of these two. There's 2 scopes that you get access to up to Gunny 2. The first one is the Scout 2.5 that you get at the first level, which is a shorter range, kind of close range scope. It's a bit like the P-Lad in Tarkov. And then you've got this thing, the Caps Classic, which goes into the low profile O-ring. So we'll pop those two on because that's the one that we've got in this particular build. And then there's this M700 thread cap. This doesn't seem to do anything. I don't know if this has any bearing on the durability. It doesn't give you any stats or anything. It doesn't say. I have a feeling that it might have something to do with the Dura, because it's supposed to shield the barrel from damage. So maybe it has something to do with Dura. I'm not exactly sure. You could buy it, it's only $51. We may as well do it just to compare the builds. So this is 3,980. As we said before, this one is 5,400. So you can see that we're making, again, a significant saving. It sort of ranges from like a 30% discount to a 20% discount, depending on the build. And I have seen them up to 35% in certain circumstances. Okay, last one I want to show you here is a gun that I've been using a lot recently, and it's one of my favorites in the game right now for fighting the AI. Not necessarily for fighting players, but for fighting AI, which is this, the MP5 SD version. This is a beauty. This is 9mm, and it comes with some pretty good ammo at Gunny level 2, which is this stuff, the Extreme Penetrator. So this deals with NIJ 3A+, which is not quite as good as level 3 armor pen, but it deals with stuff that's like around 3-ish. So 3A is worse than 3, and 3A+ is better than 3A, but not quite as good as 3. So it's a bit confusing, this system. I don't really like it as much as the Ghost system, but nevertheless, that's what we have got to work with. So we're going to go and grab ourselves a MP5 lower. So that one is this guy down here. You can see there. Now the MP5 SD, a bit like in Tarkov, it starts with the regular MP5, and the difference comes here. So rather than using an MP5 upper receiver, you use an MP5 SD upper receiver, and onto that we put the important parts. We've got an MP5 SD forearm, which is the handguard. We've then got a stock which again, you can choose either of these two. It doesn't really make that much difference. Now, I'm not going to bother putting on either the front or rear sights. We're just going to stick the low profile mount on. And then one thing that we do need to do is we need to find the suppressor. So this is the most expensive part of the MP5 SD, but it's kind of what gives it its signature look, is this integrated suppressor. And this is $2,000. So this is expensive, explains why the gun is so pricey in the first place. We've then got a magazine just to make it like for like, and this extreme penetrator stuff will add 30 of it, because you get that in the mag, as you can see over here. And there's one more thing that we need to add, which is the charging handle for this weapon, called the HK MP5 cocking handle. It's quite a funny name, but there you go. And then the only other thing that we don't have is some kind of sight. Now, I don't think at level 2 traders you can buy the Micro T2. Might be wrong, actually. It might be over on Banshee, but it doesn't really matter. You can choose whatever sight that you like that's going to fit on this upper rail. So if we select that MP5 low mount, then you can see these guys fit on here. And these are some of the more expensive ones. There are optics over on Turncoat that are 800. There's like the OKP7, kind of the curly one that you get in EFT with a little chevron. And then you've got other ones over on Banshee that's similar as well. So that's going to cost you about 1,000. So even if we pick these, which is one of the most expensive of the sights that you can buy, the EOTech holographics, that comes to 5,680 versus our price from before, which was 7,600. So again, it's about a 25% discount, which is really, really nice. This is especially good to know because there's quite a lot of AI in the game that use the MP5 SD at this point. And that means that you can firstly refill your ammo from them a lot. There's a lot of extreme penetrator around in those areas, but it also means that you can pick up those guns and you can repair them by buying new components for them. You don't just need to repair them in the stash. You know how to fix them now because you can buy all these parts from Gunny's level 1 and 2. So you can repair these guns if you need to without having to buy an entirely new one and waste a ton of money selling those guns back for 1,000 and buying these for 7,600, because that's just a huge waste of cash. So next we're going to look at Artisan. I'm going to go through these a little bit more quickly than the previous one because you probably get the point at this stage, and these guns are actually a bit easier. It's good that we started with Gunny because those ones are a bit more complex. So something like the Remington 788, you do have to be a little bit careful because you can't buy the sight mount until level 2. So this is the Remington 788 Picatinny rail. You can build the rest of the gun, so you go over here, you find the 788, you go and find the 788 stock, and you put the 788 barrel in there. But that is about as far as you can go. You could put the magazine in, but you need to have this little sight mount here, the Picatinny rail, otherwise you can't add these two scopes. These are the ones that we saw over on Gunny before, so you can pick whichever one you like. But without level 2, you can't buy the sight mount, so you're going to have to just buy this if you want to use it until you get to level 2 Artisan. SKS, on the other hand, you can just build that for cheap if you want to. 1,000 is already really quite inexpensive, to be honest with you. But if you do want a brand new one, you can grab the SKS itself, put the stock on it. Then you're going to need a 10-round magazine, a box mag. This is the one that's integrated and not detachable, so don't take multiple ones of these if you're kind of new to the game. And then you add the SKS receiver cover retaining pin. And that's basically it. You might want to add an SKS rear sight because you don't have a scope at this point, and that costs 848. You can see it's a little bit of a discount versus this one. Scorpion and the pistols are the same principle. You just go and buy the pieces that it says in the build, and you can do what you need to. Now, there is a better version of the SKS that you can get here. Again, it's the same kind of thing. So you build the SKS up, and then there's a few parts that allow you to build up this slightly nicer one, which is the SKS Strike Force Attack Light stock. Now, interestingly, this one uses some components from all the traders, which makes it a little bit more annoying because of the fact that you have to flick back and forth between them. So you have to go for the SKS, this stock instead. At level 2, you then get the 20-round magazines that are replaceable, so you can buy 2 of these and swap them in situ, which is quite nice. You've still got the same thing here, the cover retaining pin, which you need to add on. And then in order to add a muzzle device so you can make the gun perform a bit better, you'll need the SKS muzzle brake adapter. Now, you probably won't need the rear sight because this time we're going to use an item that allows you to add these, which is the rear sight Picatinny rail, which is this guy here. So we'll stick that on, and then that starts us off at 1,268. From here, to do the other stuff that we need, we're going to have to buy one of these dots or micro optics or whatever it might be from one of the other traders. So you're going to buy the SKS rear rail and click on it and just go through the different traders and see which ones fit. We then also need these stocks. We've seen this before. This is why it was good to start with Gunny. CQ A1 buffer tube, the AR-15 MOE stock, and the extended rubber butt pad. That comes from Gunny himself. Then if you go over to Turncoat, you have the AK-100 series muzzle brake. This one is in here, and that one allows you to attach it to that SKS modified version. So if you go and build all that, that ends up coming to about 2,883. versus the weapon that we've got up here. Obviously, it also depends on exactly which of these sights that you choose, whether you get the holographic or whether you get one of these micro dots or something. And as I said before, you can get them down to about 800, so it does get quite cheap. This ends up being significantly cheaper than the SKS. Now, one of the cheapest ones I found was actually the Mosin. The Mosin is really cheap, partly to do with the way that these stocks function. So the cheapest stock that you can get here is actually this one, which is maybe one that I would prefer. It does look like a bit of a Mongol, I have to say, and the recoil control is worse, but the ergonomics is better, which is, as I was saying before, something that I would prefer on a bolt action because you don't really need the recoil control. You need to be able to hold the weapon up for a long time. So if we take the Mosin and we add this on, we then are going to buy ourselves a Mosin barrel. Now there is one big difference between the Mosin that you get over on her and the Mosin that you get by building it yourself at this point, which is that we only have access to the 514mm barrel, whereas the one from the trader is 730. This has some implications for accuracy and range. Again, you can see that you get more ergonomics for this thing, which I think is probably better for the ranges that we're going to be using this particular scope on. You get minus 15 ergonomics on this, but the MOA is 3 on that one, which is not that great, and this one is 1.58, which is decent and serviceable, but for most encounters, this one is probably going to be alright. I mean, the Mosin is useful because it has pretty powerful ammo early on, same as in a game like EFT. Bang for buck, pretty high up on the penetration list for what you can get straight away, but you are going to sacrifice accuracy a little bit going this route. So yeah, that probably does explain the reason why it's a bit cheaper. Anyway, from here, we're going to then get the Coach 12 mount. The reason why you want to get the Mosin Nagant Sniper and not the regular Mosin Nagant, I'll just show you this quickly. Although this one is the same price, you'll want this one instead. Firstly, it is slightly better on ergo. I'm not exactly sure why you would ever buy this one if you don't need to, but you can see these two little pins here, which is where there is a mounting point for an optic. So if you go on that, you can see this Coach 12 mount. This is where this clips into the gun. And on top of that, you then put the PU rings, and then on top of that, you then put the Mosin Nagant PU 3.5 scope. So that goes in there, and that's only 1.1k. So this is pretty much all you need. You don't need the rear sights or anything else. You don't really need the muzzle brake. You can buy it if you want to. It's muzzle device efficiency of 10 and a lower accuracy modifier, which you probably don't really need on the Mosin, to be honest with you. Other than that, I'm going to need to grab one magazine, internal, because we don't have a fancy version of the Mosin just yet, and that comes to 2,122 versus 3,500. So again, it's a big discount versus the Mosin. This is over a third discount on the Mosin if you want to build one of these, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Right, Turncoat is very easy. He's the AK man. At level 1, you can build yourself an AK-74N simply by buying an AK-74N here, a pistol grip, a stock, a gas tube, a handguard, like so, and then we'll just compare it to this to make sure I haven't missed anything out. Obviously, you can get like a 10-round magazine. I don't like using these early because the magazines are so limited, which is a real shame. And then you're probably going to want the rear sight. Put that on there, and then you can get the cover. The cover doesn't seem to do anything either, so I have a feeling that this may have something to do with durability, or it might do nothing. So you might be able to get away with not buying this. If you don't buy this, this is going to make the gun $912, which is like insane price compared to the one that you buy up here. But again, with the 10-round mags, I don't think it's necessarily that great. I will say that the AKS-74U is slightly more compelling, if only for the fact that it comes with this AKS-74U M-Lock handguard, which means you can put a little sight on the top. This is the most important part. I think if you get a rail, you might be able to get one underneath. I haven't really tried, like a vertical foregrip, but it's this sight you can put on top that's most important. So if you find a sight out in the raid, you can slap one on top of the weapon here, which is kind of handy, because there's not really any other way of mounting a Picatinny-style sight early on the AKs because of the parts you've got here. With the 74N, this does come with a side mounting section. You can see this part here, so when you click on it, that's why these guys appear. So you've got the Cobra EKP and a PKO1 red dot. These are not necessarily your favorites, so if you do want to have something that mounts on top and doesn't go around the side, you can technically do it with this 74U. You can't buy the handguard early on. At level 2, you can now buy the handguards, lots of different ones that you can choose from, and there's not really any difference between any of these things. They're all the same. The AKs build out in the same way. You've got the AK-74M, the AK-74N, same in FDE, an AKM, AKMN, AKMN, AKMSN, AKS-74U. So to point out in here, the only two here that you can't add the side mounting rifle scopes on is the AKM and the AKS-74U. Typically, an AK needs an M, like a 74M or a 74N. You need that little modifier on there because it means that you've got the side mounting. The AKM is kind of the exception because it's not part of the nomenclature. It's just like AKM, so you don't get a side mounting piece on there. But once you've done that, you just build them all in the same way. So you get a gas tube, you put on any of these handguards, a stock of your choosing, put one of the dust covers over the top. And then the key to these side mounted ones is that you can use this, which is the AK303M mount. This will fit on any of these. As you can see, actually, if you just click on the AK303M mount, you can see which ones it works on. So as I said, it works on all of them except the AKM and the AK-74U, where the sight has to go on the top. And this will then be compatible with both this, the OKP7, which I actually really quite like, it's one of my favorite sights, and this one, the Cobra Red Dot. So depends on which one you want to use. I've used the OKP7 a bit more. Typically this one works really nicely in video games because the surround is really thin and it looks nice. It's got some really nice effects in the rain too, it looks very cool. So this one's pretty neat. You can fit that straight on here and put it on these guns. So Turncoat is pretty straightforward up to level 2 in my opinion. Right, the final guy we have is Banshee. I don't really rate his level 1 equipment. You do get the MP7, which I thought might be quite fun, but you can only get 20 round mags, which is real kind of fun police situation with the MP7, given that it's got a 950 RPM. So it makes it very difficult to use. But you can build them early. So the MP7A1, you put it on there, and then you put the stock on, and then that's basically it. You don't really need anything for this weapon. It's very straightforward. Most of it comes from, this base unit that you get. The rest of it, as you can see, is flash hider, micro rear sight, front sight, and the magazine. Unfortunately, you can't actually buy the flash hider, which means that you're always going to be losing out on this muzzle device efficiency stat. But I don't think it makes that much difference at level 1, as I said before. And this means that you're paying basically under half for this gun. If you want to use the MP7, it costs about the same amount as an SKS, and you can use it with 20 round magazines, and it's quite fun. It's not the biggest bullet in the game, which does have some implications in Grey Zone Warfare, but you do get access to FMJ immediately, which is NIJ 3A+ stopping power, which for this particular weapon is pretty neat. Although because it is quite small, it does take a bit of time to go through. It's not going to make a huge wound cavity inside, which means that sometimes people can feel quite bullet spongy. Going up to level 2, and we should ignore this by the way, because this is one of the special ones that you get out in the world, so I'm not gonna mention this. The only reason why you'd want to do this is if you want an Elcan and you can't buy one at the moment. So over at level 2, you get the M14. I wouldn't really advise this. You can build this cheaper if you want to, but it's very difficult to put sights on. You basically have to use iron sights. We then have the MP7A2, and this thing you can build significantly cheaper just by going over to one of the other guys. So this thing has got an RK6 on it, which is 15% ergo. It's actually on Turncoat, so if you go to Turncoat 2, you can see there's an RK6 here with 15% ergonomics. So that's how you end up replicating that. So if you go on to this guy, you can now buy the 30 rounders, which is a lot better for this particular weapon series, and you can end up building this. Let me just check my spreadsheet. I think you can get this guy for about 2,830. So this is also a very steep discount compared to what you can buy from the trader directly. You can also modify the SA VZ58 as well. I think this one is a bit fearsome in terms of recoil, 800 RPM, but fires 7.62x39, and the stats on it are kind of guff. You can't really attach any sights or anything. It's very difficult early on. I don't think this is a gun to be using early, but again, you can make this a bit cheaper. I think this one, if you build it out, ends up costing about 2,500, maybe a little bit less, 2,200. So you get that discount if you want to build it that way. But this allows you to at least give it a try if you want. I gave it a go and it ends up just shooting the ceiling. You have to really pull down a lot on it. And I think there were just other better, easier weapons to use than 7.62x39 in the early game. So hopefully that helped you get through the early modding. I do think that this game could really do with a workbench like Tarkov has, where you can right click and say modify, and then it comes up full screen and it shows you which parts are available from all the different traders. I think that would be really good because the click and look is okay, but it does take a bit of time to get used to. Even broadly knowing what I'm looking for, because of my experience with EFT, it still sometimes is a bit confusing, especially looking between multiple traders, because it's not like selecting a weapon then keeps it selected on one of these other screens, which does make it a bit painful, especially if you're having to piece together things from multiple vendors at the same time. So I hope that helped. I hope that you're all enjoying patch 0.4. As always, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as usual, have fun in your raids.